All right, everyone, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. Thank you for joining me. My name is Konrad Rogoz. Welcome to episode 106 of This Week in Tyranny. Today is Friday, the 13th of December, 2024. It's Friday the 13th and a full moon. Perfect. And actually, this marks officially 2 years of This Week in Tyranny running. It was December 12th of 2022 when I made episode 1. So it fits together nicely that this would be the 2-year anniversary of the show, because I'm kind of gonna pat myself on the back a little bit in this episode. I'm going to be very relaxed. It's one of my more informal episodes, although I got some notes. So I'm gonna talk my shit, say what I need to say. There's a lot of important information here, but after 106 episodes, I've done it this way, I've done it that way, so this is going to be one of those that is definitely more relaxed and impromptu, kind of. So I take particular pleasure in going out on a limb and being proven correct. That's a great feeling. It's particularly satisfying when I had to take a risk to do it. I think everybody relates to that. And that's what happened when I talk about Brian Thompson, CEO of the health insurance company, after he was killed. I pointed out a couple of things, right? It's a new event that happens, and I made some claims, and then you don't know if those claims are gonna be proven correct. Because at the end of the day, you don't truly know if what you're seeing in the news out there, you don't know if what you're seeing is actually happening, right? Like, it's hard for us to know who's really pulling the strings. Like, did they really do that? At the end of the day, we weren't there, so we don't know, right? All we can rely on is logic. But time after time, it happens to be the case. When we've seen a lot of this happen, and it's not really that the people nowadays, like me and other researchers, like people haven't become more prophetic. People haven't become, I don't think they've actually become better. It's just that the methodology is more blatant. Like, there's less, at a certain point, criminals get sloppier and they don't cover their tracks as well. Think of any true crime or serial killer story. They start getting sloppy after a while, and it's almost like they want to be caught. And this is what it feels like the case with tyranny in the world today. It feels like they want to be stopped because it is so simple, so repetitive. So I apologize in advance if I'm going to sound cocky and arrogant in this episode. It makes me cringe a little bit, but what would be worse for me to stomach is if I didn't say what I really felt like. So here we go. Last week I talked about the shooting. This is another episode about that, but with a much more detailed perspective. And that's because I'm going to refer to a New York Times article. Now, why would you do a New York Times article? Like, it's like looking at Wikipedia. Like, why would you use Wikipedia? Why not? Like, one of the points here is that there is no such thing as negative information for me. Bad sources, I could give a shit about bad sources. I think we should have the ability to draw from any source to make a story. And that's what I do. I'll make an episode about literally anything. I basically have. And that is because I utilize what is called the Trivium method. So, also in this episode, kind of 2 in 1, I'm going to talk about the Trivium, because this tells you how to analyze information, and then, not... You don't have to listen to somebody break things down for you. You can break things down yourself and break it down for other people. That's kind of the point. Now, even though the word trivium makes me cringe a little bit too, because I don't even think of it inside myself as the trivium. Like, for me, it's just about being intelligent, like just reason, intelligence, like analyzing things in a way that makes sense. But the trivium is an actual thing. It's an actual concept, so I'm going to talk about it. The actual thing that it was the way that the ancient Greeks did education. Like, first you learn the alphabet, right? You learn math, you learn natural sciences. This is the grammar stage. And then you learn logic. Then you read the philosophers, you investigated ideas, really looking at ideas in the same way you looked at numbers and letters, right? The fundamental law of logic is A equals A, right? The law of identity. It's actually math. Like, you can break it down into equations. And then after all that, then they would teach, at this point, you would have a student who's like a teenager, young adult. You learn to debate. You learn how to convince people, right? How to write your ideas and how to structure your arguments, okay? And express them. That's the Trivium method. Grammar, logic, rhetoric are the 3 stages. Now, that's the classical world, right? That's how they did it. I'm not classical. I'm very modern day. I'm in the modern day, so I explain it differently with scientifically simple and plain and yet meticulously detailed, descriptive, plain fucking English. I think plain fucking English is a beautiful language, and that's how I explain it. I think there is really a value to using articulate language with swearing and street slang, because again, there are no contradictions in the universe for me. So I think it's very important for us to be able to communicate with somebody who's very simple and then somebody who is very book learny, So that's plain fucking English for you. Now, the trivium is this in plain English. Identity is 1. The grammar stage is just a plain old number 1. It's identity. Now, motion is 2, right? The logic stage is all about motion. Then 3 is your process. Is really change. Change is 3 is the number of change. It's the smallest number necessary to demonstrate and determine causality. It's really all about causality, right? If you have one thing, you just have that thing. You have identity. You can't really say anything about it. It's just there. Then when you have 2 things, then you can see like motion, right? There's a reflection, or you're starting to see what in the 3rd step you're seeing as change. To really describe anything, you need 3 steps. You need a beginning, middle, and an end. That's the basic point of why the trivium works. It's the number necessary to engage in semiotics, meaning to find the meaning of any symbol, which means finding the meaning of anything. Okay? It's like life would not be able to communicate if it wasn't for that 3-step process. Okay? In other words, to make a connection to anything, a relationship is a connection between 2 people. Yes, it is. But there is also a 3rd element, which is both their independent connections to a single objective reality. Okay? So think of it like a triangle in a circle. And for things to connect, they need to make 3. And that's the trivium. And to learn or make use of anything, it just is a 3-step process. That's what it comes down to. Grammar, logic, rhetoric. Now, grammar is primary information. It's fundamental building blocks. It's anything that is broken down to the level where it's identifiable, distinguishable, and separate from anything else. So, like an example would be a letter, like the letter G. Any letter G that has ever been written is going to be the same as any other letter G in history, and it's going to be different from any other letter. It's going to be different from M, it's going to be different from C, it's going to be the letter G, okay? It's that simple, and how we pick it up is anything that we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. It's anything. 5 senses is... Our 5 senses is the grammar stage, the way we pick it up. And it's also primary and objective. And that's not to say that information can't be wrong, but when you break it down to the simplest level, information is just information. Like, that's what it is. There's really no analysis here. There's only absorption of information. Okay? So it's like the raw materials of anything. Now, logic, we know what logic is, right? So it's structures, their connections, their patterns, right? Relationships between instances, occurrences, and it's also a historical record of what has occurred in the past and what the outcome was. So it's a record, okay? Like the last 1 million times that somebody threw something from a height, it dropped down at this rate, and that's what forms the basis for logic. It's a record of things that happened, and when things happen every time, they're repeatable. You logically deduce a law from that, right? Those are our laws. So this is something that is actually secondary, okay? Because anything we think, logic has to be thought of in our head by us, by human beings. Like, gravity would still work, but the logic of the law of gravity, it is a human thing. It's a human perspective of that. It's a human explanation. So it happens within human beings. It's in our head, meaning it's secondary, right? But while it is secondary, right, it doesn't exist in nature in that way, it's still objective. So it does exist in nature, right? It's just not interpreted that way, right? Because that is a very human thing. That's our mind that that has deduced those laws of logic, and that's why we call it that. But it's very important that it's objective, meaning your logic is the same as anyone else's logic. There's no, you can put the two side by side and compare them, and you could see which one is correct. Okay, but of course, there's no shortage of human error in the logic stage, and that we call, of course, logical fallacies. And there are plenty of those, right? The straw man, ad hominem attacks. But again, that proves the point that it's objective, because you make errors in it, and we can clearly define why those are the errors. So anyway, logic is like, if we started with the letter G in grammar, logic would be like you add a vowel after the G, and if it's an O, it's gonna make like a sound like go, okay? Like then the laws of phonics and things like that, like when you start stringing them together and then looking at relationships. And then you have the rhetoric stage, which is conclusions drawn from and ideas created through objective reality. It's about conclusions drawn from logic and grammar. And rhetoric, like logic, is secondary, meaning that humans do it, not nature. But unlike grammar and logic, it's subjective. So in rhetoric, here we go beyond the information and the connections between information. And also, on top of that, a person's unique and individual touch on reality. And so rhetoric, it's a combination between body and mind. So you have the five senses of grammar, and then you have the mind, logic, and that's rhetoric, five senses plus mind. In the body, it takes place. It takes place really anywhere where you're acting, right? In the hands, in the body and mind, but specifically in the voice. The voice is like the symbol of rhetoric, right? When you're speaking, but it's also art, poetry, humor, charm, performance. All of these things are rhetoric, right? And just like a performance, it's subjective. It can have objective parts of it, but really, how good someone's rhetoric it is based on how good it is to you, And if we continue the example, then if a letter was grammar, and then you string them together, the laws of language and phonics and the laws of grammar, if that was logic, then rhetoric would be not just big sentences and paragraphs and books, but what they mean. So it's about the meaning to you. And that's the Trivium broken down. I feel like people just say the same thing about the Trivium every time. And it's missing the rhetoric stage. It's missing your own flavor on it. It's missing your own spin, It's like people talk about the Trivium, but they're only giving the grammar of Trivium. You got to connect it to everything else, show how it works, and then put your own spin on it and add to it, right? That's the whole thing about the Trivium. It's not static. It's a framework for dynamic processing of information. So no, the Trivium doesn't make you automatically adept or a genius. It's just a framework for correctly dealing with reality, making sense of the world. And actually, the two biggest benefits of the Trivium, they always go unspoken, unappreciated, for me at least. And one, like the gift of the Trivium is it allows you to know where you are. It's like a compass. It's triangulating your location on the wheel of nature. And especially the Trivium is a great demolition tool. See, knowing the Trivium allows you to deconstruct anything in the world, and that point you towards what is missing, and otherwise you'd be lost. So, taking a thing that's huge and complicated, and you can break it down and peel away first the rhetoric, then the logic, get to the grammar, and then you could put it back together, right? It's like demolition, deconstruction, breaking it down into the individual elements to see if the way it was put together, if it actually makes sense. This is how you find out if things are true or not when you weren't actually there. Going back to what I was saying in the beginning, right? With these stories, how do I know these things are true? Like, you only know by deconstructing them and putting them back together and testing them. You gotta go see, So this, like, anything that ever happens in the world, this is how the Trivium looks in a real example. The first thing I think when anything happens is someone trying to bullshit me right now? And it's strange to say it like that, but that's the world we live in. It's a very reasonable thing to approach any natural occurrence with that in mind. Like, whose rhetoric is this? Does someone stand to benefit from me responding in a particular way? And that's how I think, right? And you go from there. And then when you exhaust that and analyze if somebody has a rhetoric there, then you look at the logic and you look, you say, does it make sense what is happening right now, right? What I'm seeing, is it consistent with reality and consistent with how I know things behave? Or does it violate known laws of nature? Like the Twin Towers collapsing at free fall speed, despite having like 100 floors of mass, very little of which was actually found at the bottom at ground zero. But yet people still believe in the official story. So why do people believe the false logic of the 9/11 story? The answer is because they are not open to rhetoric techniques that involved occult methodology and mass murder. It's really simple. Again, the Trivium is right there. They just don't believe that people would do that. And that is why they're stuck at the stage where they cannot see that the logic doesn't add up. Right? Because they're afraid of that next step. Because if that logic gets broken down and you start really thinking about it, then it is like that possibility that that monster under the bed, you're going to have to get under the bed and look what is there and check. You can't just put the covers over your head. And that's what it comes down to. So, and then when you get down to base primary information, you take it for what it is and you use it to fuel your logic, and then you put your own flavor on it and actually do something with it. So that your rhetoric can influence the world to make it more like the world that you want to live in. That's number one. Okay, that's the first thing that the Trivium allows you to do. And number two, for me, the Trivium shows you that you can never give up. Like, if you just keep trying at something, you can solve any problem and any mystery out there. Even if you take it all the way to the limits of existence, and even if you find an untouchable mystery that can never be solved, you still will have learned even more than that mystery was worth in the first place, because you'll have learned about yourself. Other than that, anything can be described with the Trivium. And this word we use Trivium and the way I describe it, again, this is just somebody else's logic and rhetoric, right? But that thing itself, that framework itself, its form and essence was created by God, and it is God. You're going to find the Trinity everywhere you look. All throughout history, it's been this way. You're going to find the Trinity everywhere. If you're looking for it, you'll find it everywhere, pointing you toward your goals, like a spearhead, literally. So the way I see it, the Trivium is really a tool of faith. Meaning you can have faith that the way that the universe works is good, that there is justice in the world, and that if you follow the principles of the universe, it won't lead you astray. That's the kind of faith I'm talking about. So it's reason and religion, it's science and art, body and mind, body and spirit, it's subject and object. And like I said, there's no contradiction in the universe, actually. And that's the Trivium. If the Trivium is defined in a way, most profoundly for me, it's a tool for the reconciliation of contradictions, of all conflicts and contradictions. So I'm going to go through this article and we're going to apply the Trivium to it, okay? And again, I could give two fucks about the author and their intentions, right? Their intentions, their omissions, their deceptions. Because this ain't our first rodeo with top headline American news, right? It's not that impressive. We can figure it out. And if they're lying, we're going to see their lies. And if there are things, they're hidden messages, we're going to see them too. That's kind of the whole point of the Trivium, or whatever you call it. Now, the title of this is Police Say Suspect's Notebook Described Rationale for CEO Killing. Update for anybody that missed this part of the story. They've caught this guy. They've caught the guy who's the suspect. Now, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but it seems like everyone knows this is the guy. And there it is, they've got him. So now, of course, this story is far from over, right? It's just beginning, really. Now, subheading, it's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence, said a sentence in a spiral notebook belonging to the man charged with murdering Brian Thompson. By Ashley Southall and Maria Kramer, December 11, 2024. Now, Ashley and Maria, do I know who they are? No. Does it matter? No. These articles, they're like a dime a dozen, you find so much written out there. You don't have to know everything, right? It's not like back in the day where you have to analyze your sources and everything. Most of all, these people say the same things. They're the same kind of writers. Who knows if AI isn't writing these articles, right? It'll be about the same level of intelligence. So here we go. Luigi Mangione, who has been charged with killing the chief executive of United Healthcare outside a company Investors Day in Manhattan, was arrested with a notebook that detailed plans for the shooting, according to two law enforcement officials. The notebook described going to a conference and killing an executive, the officials said. Quote, "What do? You whack the CEO at the annual parasitic bean counter convention. It's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence," was one passage written in the notebook, the official said. The shooting of the executive Brian Thompson occurred early December 4th as Mr. Thompson arrived on a West 54th Street outside a Hilton hotel to prepare for the United Healthcare workers meeting. His assailant escaped on a bicycle and then disappeared. Police officials in New York were able to match Mr. Mangione's fingerprints to those on a water bottle and a Kind snack bar wrapper recovered near the crime scene, Commissioner Jessica Tisch said at a news conference on Wednesday. Yeah, sure they did. And I've mentioned this too, how the just very conveniently, I think I could remember the passport of the 9/11 hijackers just happened to fall out, and they recovered the passport, and things like this happen in these stories. And of course they would recover these fingerprints, right? Remember the fingerprints on the water bottle were smudged, but then there was also a candy wrapper found, and they just threw that sentence in. It's very ridiculous to me, these details. But anyway, let's go on. Commissioner Tisch said that the New York police have now uncovered the unregistered gun that was found in Mr. Mangione's possession when he was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania on Monday. The police brought it to the department's crime lab where they matched it to the 3 shell casings that were found at the crime scene. Of course they matched them. Everything worked out exactly as it was supposed to. Law and Order couldn't have done it any better. It went so smoothly and so fast it happened. The crime lab confirmed they matched the suspects, the police officials said in a briefing with reporters on Wednesday afternoon. The police were also analyzing a bag of bullets found this week in Central Park to see if they were connected to the killing, one of the law enforcement officials said. Mr. Mangione, 26, was captured Monday after a tip from an employee at a McDonald's in Altoona who was alerted by a customer who recognized him. He has been denied bail on a murder charge and is fighting extradition to New York, a process that could take weeks. He is contesting it, his lawyer, Thomas Dickey, said on Tuesday. Mr. Dickey did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Wednesday. Now, these names just made me laugh, of course. Dickey, we all know what a dick is, right? So we're talking about like the quintessential male symbol, right? Like his name is Thomas Dickey. But of course, when you add that E or I to the end of a word, when you add that soft ending at a word, you make it seem small, right? Like it's called a diminutive. So when you have like a big fucking bag, it's called a bag. It's very... But then if you have a baggie is like a little, it's like smaller. So I thought that was very curious. And then if that was it, then that would just be a funny little thing. But actually, this guy, Luigi Mangione, that last name is very, it stands out, of course. Now, man, it has the word man in it, right? So it's Mangione. But also, those letters, Gione, it really sounds like gyno, and we all know that's the prefix for the woman's body parts, right? Now, so you have Dicky, and then you have gyno now. So this guy Mangione, it's like he's got both. So he's got the word man in it, but then he's also, the rest of his name is like a woman, right? In a very rudimentary way. I get it's rudimentary, but I'm gonna connect it. When I was younger, I've heard this word a lot. They used to say mangina. They used to call a person a mangina, referring to a very weak or pathetic man. And I'm seeing a pattern here because I'm seeing now killings very often like this, high profile. They're rituals, and the victim or the attacker is a symbol or represents the people in general. So it's really not about the people involved in the crime. It's about everybody that's watching it unravel. So a lot of this is it's what's called a cult mockery, right? And here, it's just straight up mockery. And then now Luigi, his name Luigi, sonically, phonically, even visually, it's just not a very strong name. And again, it's like the diminutive at the end, like. His name isn't Mike, it's Luigi, And I know it's Italian, and it's no disrespect to Italians. I get it. But, this is affecting mostly Americans. It's happened in Manhattan. When Americans hear Luigi, they think of Mario's brother. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, Super Mario and Luigi. And again, Luigi is the sidekick, right? So, Luigi is the beta male in this scenario, in the Mario and Luigi universe. Okay, so what did these names prove? Like, in a vacuum, nothing. But having the previous knowledge of how orchestrated mass shootings events go, they so often contain these names, these ridiculous names, or themes of mockery, emasculation, and just a general embarrassment of humanity, both men and women. And since we're talking about names, my friend Dan Alexander pointed out that even if this person was not selected for his name, and it wasn't all planned out and controlled. All things are as they should be, meaning these people that are involved in these events, they gravitate to each other based on their names and who they are in the universe and where they're supposed to be. And really, it's a great point, because not all of the events that I talk about, not all 106 episodes of my show have been like a classic string pulling, behind closed doors, evil, tyrannical action or plot. There's just no way. It's too many, right? Some of these things would have happened organically, totally without any influence. They would have happened. But yet, the narratives persist. The narrative applies every time. And the agendas are being actually advanced every time. And we're losing more and more of our lives to a small predator class. And this is a huge point of my work. I don't talk about enough. It's that the collective mindset, the worldview of the people, is one that enthrones the occult ruling class. So it's really not their fault. It's not like we can blame the hidden hand. And it's not like if they would be gone overnight magically, it's not like the problem would be solved. Even if there were no psychopath bankers, if there were no control freak occultists, even if they disappeared overnight, we would create them. We would mold and raise up people again, just like that, and put people like that into power. Because people are self-cannibalists. Self-cannibalists. They consume themselves. People can't help but do exactly the things that work against them and kill them and diminish them. And they turn away from precisely that which would lead to their benefit. And I'm not saying they want to. This is a trauma behavior. But trauma behaviors are just, again, like records of past actions as well. So it's a very complicated mix of human experience, what has happened, our parents over the generations. But also it is a lack of love. And it's both self-love and self-respect, and that for others. It's really both. But the problem is, it's a big psychological problem. It's a big, deep spiritual problem. People actually are consuming themselves, and this is the reason we're enslaved. But back to Luigi, and whether or not, to what degree he was put up to this. In my view, it's clear that Luigi had help. He had help, he had information, he had plenty of people get out of his way, where ordinarily they wouldn't, and this wouldn't happen. But if he didn't, even if he didn't, and he actually did this himself totally, and it's just as the official story, would it change anything? Because all it says to me is that it just highlights that the only people who have the drive, the skills, the discipline, and the courage to walk up behind somebody and smoke them, unfortunately, it's the people that only see the enemy as corrupt rich men who make their money in the free market. Now, however shady it is, but they're making it in the free market at least. They're not holding anybody at gunpoint. So they want to kill them, but no one wants to deal with the people who decide on war, the politicians, the IRS agents, the members of think tanks that specialize in children and what to teach the children and manipulate their hormones and their futures, right? Nobody's touching those people. To this day, nobody's touched any of those people. Nobody's touched any of the Frankfurt School guys. Nobody's touched anybody who's doing the Alfred Kinsey type of stuff, right? Nobody's touching those people. Okay? Nobody's touching the high level. We're not going to talk about what kind of super orthodox fundamental religions they are that engage in genital stuff, right? With circumcision and female. All right? Nobody's touched them, right? I would start there. But, that's me. Back to the article. When Mr. Mangione was arrested, he had the so-called ghost gun. He had a ghost gun. Continuing back to the article. A ghost gun, a suppressor, and false identification cards similar to those believed to have been used by the killer, officials said. He also had identification bearing his real name. The police also found Mr. Mangione with a Faraday bag, which blocks electromagnetic signals and prevents a cell phone from being tracked, the police said at a briefing on Wednesday. Now, these details give away the agenda. That's why I couldn't wait to talk about the ghost gun. Ghost gun means no serial number. Okay? It means a firearm that you produce. You can buy kits. You used to, well, I don't know how easy it is nowadays, but I know it was quite easy to purchase a kit, parts that are not purchased as a firearm, and then you could put those parts together, and then you have a working firearm, making it just like you make any other tool, and there you go. Has no serial number or anything. Now, you're gonna hear, if you haven't already, you're gonna hear a lot more about ghost guns and to make them more illegal, to make them more harshly punished because they're untraceable. I think all guns should be ghost guns. The whole concept of having a serial number that marks you, to look at the history of a firearm and then try to put something on you, try to hold you liable for something. It's like walking around with a mouthpiece and matching it to your dog to see if your dog bit someone, and then they'll take your dog away from you. Like, this is what it is to me. But anyway, the way it's an increasingly prominent story, the ghost guns, just shows you this is the next step in disarmament. They want to take care of unregistered firearms now. They started out with the AR-15s and all that. They've had all those mass shootings. Then this recent one, they're going with the more compact guns. The recent one I'm referring to, the Highland Park shooting in not far from me, where the weapon used was they're quite effective weapons, and this is the reason why they're used, because those are the weapons that would be the most effective in a real urban rebellion sort of scenario. And now unregistered firearms, they're going to do their best to combat ghost guns, and then they're going to go to 3D printed firearms, and you're going to see another orchestrated event involving that, because they want to take away these capabilities for the people to make their own resources. Not just guns, but guns are like the ultimate symbol, okay? They're like, it's just like a dick is an ultimate symbol of masculinity, because it just is, right? That's, what's more unique to men than that? Like, sorry to be crude, but like, let's call things what they are. It's the same thing with the gun thing. It's like the ultimate symbol of power, especially masculine power. It's especially American, so that's why it doesn't surprise me at all that you got a guy participating in an event like this, and his name is Luigi Mangione, defended by lawyer Mr. Thomas Dickey. And I'll keep my eyes peeled for any hilarious names in the court proceedings and the trial. There's that. And people don't stress the gun thing. They don't think the gun thing is important. I don't get it, honestly. I don't get why every U.S. citizen doesn't put at least 10% of their savings in firearms. Like, you should have at least 10 guns, at least. If you understand freedom and you understand the value of human life, if you care about women and children, you should have enough weapons, not for you, not for your family, but enough to arm the whole block. And look, I'm the first one to admit, like, trust me, I know that the mythical Second American Revolution, it won't happen, probably won't happen. I'm aware that any rebellion that will break out would be met with the dirtiest, most horrific tactics ever seen. I get it, and that the American gun owners will likely be very ill equipped for it, for whatever happens. And I know that our guns may be useless, and what's even more likely than all that would be that there would be so much infighting between the people, as opposed to the real enemies, that we would be done before any real movement started. I get it. But all you guys out there, your reluctance to firearm ownership, it's not really a logical one. It's just because you guys didn't grow up with one, or maybe you did and had a bad experience, or you did grow up with guns and just never really resonated with that. look, for whatever reason you don't love guns, and for whatever reason I do, absolutely rocks my socks off. I love guns, um, and furthermore, I just understand the mindset of a societal predator, of a killer. Like, I just, somewhere along the way, I got how these people think. Uh, you should ask Mark Passio about this too. Listen to how he talks about it. He's been with these people. This is a former Satanist. I was not one. But if you know what these people think, like, you kind of just get them. You know how to spot them. And the world is like not the same to you as to other people, because you get how many people there are like this that see the world this way. And what it comes down to is that anyone who has this tool, that's a firearm, they can turn your life upside down and take everything that's yours with the push of a button. Like, yeah, there are a lot of consequences for that, maybe, if you get caught. But consequences aside, they have the power to do that. Like, when you have a gun, you can do that at your discretion to anyone. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be the most pathetic person ever. You just have to have the power to push a button. And that's significant to them, because people who are like evildoers and like criminals and rapists, like, they're really pathetic people. So they wouldn't, very rarely are they able to do the things they want to do, right? So this tool, it allows all these people to live out the things that they're actually too pathetic to live out. Now, without a gun, no one does that to me. Nobody could take away, my life, my property. I don't care if you're the heavyweight champion or Navy SEAL or Green Beret. Bottom line is, I ain't going. Like, it's not gonna be that easy. Yeah. You might win, like, right? But it's so hard. It would be so difficult, right? I mean, yeah, try to catch a chicken that doesn't want to be caught, even. Like, it's a human being who doesn't want to go is a very hard thing to deal with. But with a gun, you could do it. With a gun, you could easily do it. And I wouldn't let myself get pushed around, and you'll have to shoot me. But you can, right? So you'll be able to take my life away like that if you have that tool. But the point is, evil people love exercising unearned power over their innocent victims. Okay? And they can do that. But you can also be one less victim. And this is not even about being the first to pull your gun out and be effective in a self-defense scenario, because that's actually really difficult, and it has so many variables. Like, you have to be trained, you have to be ready, and things can still go wrong. If you're outnumbered, it can still go wrong. I'm not saying it's like a magical equalizer. It doesn't matter. Even if you never use the gun, the fact that you have it is such a deterrent to all thieves and criminals and rapists, all the way from petty street level, and they only get slimier and more cowardly the higher they are in the hierarchy of evil that goes all the way up to world leaders. But they completely alter their approach if they know you're armed. And I like that. This is literally if they see it, but also just if your statistics on their records. They know how many guns are out there, and every single one that is in the hands of the people is it helps the people, not only in this extreme life and death scenario that I realize is constantly in the background, but also as far as economic purchasing power, as far as civil liberties, even, right? It would help all of these things if you had there's no bigger checks and balances on the power of government than firearm ownership by the citizenry. I mean, they have to act completely different if they know you've got that with you. And with me, they gotta at least always know. Like, you gotta know. Watch your fucking self around me, because I have a 24/7 green light on. Green light all the time. You can wake me up at 3 a.m. I'm ready for war. I would love that. I would shit my pants with joy if you woke me up in the middle of the night and say revolution's starting off or it's like time to fight. I'd be like, finally, you know. Um, and obviously, I know that. Right, I'm just talking my shit a little bit. I obviously know that war is a horrific thing, but things are bad enough as it is, and I cannot wait for the opportunity to put my money where my mouth is, because it has been time long ago to really call things what they are. Stop, dispense with the euphemisms. Stop with all of the sweet talking, and we go get stuff done really. Okay? So 24/7 green light and against any criminals. It's scorched earth, it's furious war, and the bottom line is, if you have that with you, any criminals, street or state, I have the tools to get the job done, and it's as simple as that. And that's what they want to do away with, and people just don't see it. Now they mentioned the ghost gun, they mentioned the Faraday bag. Now what they do through this is the Faraday bag. Of course, it blocks the electromagnetic radiation. It's amazing how they do this. This article makes it seem like this guy is crazy. That like anything that has to do with privacy and cell phone radiation, it's becoming now associated with domestic terrorism. When this is like the most reasonable thing ever, that you don't want to have, microwave and cell phone radiation, and that you would want to have privacy and not be tracked. Have we had enough hacks? Have we not had enough tracking? Have we not had enough CIA and federal admissions that the data is collected? Have we had not enough studies of what cell phone radiation does to living tissues? And now it makes it seem like this, like obviously the guy was he would be taking steps to be concealed, but again, it associates these very reasonable things like protecting yourself from data collection and radiation. It makes you associated with domestic terrorism. And I remember the good old days where the terrorists used to be Muslims in caves. And wow, so much has changed. Now it's you. Now it's us that we're the terrorists. And look how quickly that happened. Not even a decade. But it was never a doubt if you knew the playbook back then. We didn't know the playbook back then. This kind of alternative research community. I mean, before Jordan Maxwell, who was really talking about anything like this, So this is fresh, but we now know that this whole terrorist archetype, it's always supposed to morph into the American citizenry. It's always supposed to, the so-called terrorists are actually the people inside of the country. And that's why you see now we had Guantanamo Bay and everything, right? And all of those, the waterboarding and all of the Guantanamo Bay stuff, that's where they took the January 6th insurrectionists, right? So at the end of the day, it's the citizens that end up being the ones who are persecuted and hunted, and not the terrorists. I mean, you go back to the burning of the Reichstag, right? Same thing. Old playbooks. Now, back to the article. He also had a 262-word handwritten note, which begins by appearing to take responsibility for the murder. The note, which officials described as a manifesto, also mentioned the existence of a notebook. The recovery of the notebook was first reported by CNN. Of course. I talked about the manhunt reporting and how they would describe every step in detail. It's been the neatest scavenger hunt, hasn't it? The first they saw the guy, then they didn't see his face, then they found the bottle, then they found the candy wrapper, then they found some more photos, right? And they just happened to find one clue after another, and now they've got it. Now they've got his notebook. Oh, isn't that convenient? Now they're going to read all of the things he was thinking, right? Sure they are, Yeah, it couldn't be any more perfect. They've tracked the crumbs step by step, and lo and behold, they got their guy. Now, what did they say about it? The suspect saw the killing as a symbolic takedown. I do too, in a different way. According to a New York Police Department internal report that detailed parts of the 3-page document, he, quote, likely views himself as a hero of sorts who has finally decided to act upon such injustices, the report said. And when I read that, it blows my mind sometimes, because I talk about the heroic journey. He talks about being a hero. I talk about being a real man. His name is Mangione, and a hero. And then, of course, I talk about injustice all the time, right? I use that word all the time. It used to be my intro show about global injustice. And this has happened a few times now, where a story I cover, it like contains some of the language specifically that I use a lot. And I'm not saying that I'm like having an influence on this. I'm not. But it does make me feel like one day I'm going to be covering one of these things, and one of these things is going to happen, and in the manifesto they're going to say that they watch my show. It's like I learned everything from truthandlaw.com. That'll be hilarious if it happens, and I really feel like it wouldn't surprise me. Let's continue with this. On his way into court on Tuesday afternoon, Mr. Mangione shouted about, quote, an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience. That's what he said. Now the article goes on, it was not clear what he was referring to as deputies worked to push him into the courthouse. Isn't it obvious what he was referring to? I don't know exactly how this happens, or to what degree he knows, or what it was that made him say this. But this is when the truth is told to you in plain sight. It's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience. Again, go back to the Trivium. Go back to logic. Okay? This thing went off without a hitch. No bystanders were killed. Perfect assassination. Perfect manhunt. They got him, it seems like just the right amount of time. No really misreportings, no missteps. Everything goes off very neat. And this thing is going to go off just like that. They found a notebook. Everything is simple. The story makes sense. No twists, really. It's all very tidy. And I'd say that's an insult to the intelligence of the American people. Back to the article. On Wednesday, the sheriff of Blair County, James E. Ott, said that Mr. Mangione had not otherwise given deputies any problems. Just the one time he gave that outburst, telling the truth. Mr. Mangione, part of a sprawling and prominent Baltimore family, went to an elite high school in the city and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. He had worked at several tech companies and had a long interest in developing computer games. In years of posts on a Reddit account, he describes a series of life-altering health problems. He said that he had back pain that worsened until a surgery in 2023, and that he had struggled with brain fog. The back pain. Now, I'm somebody who had like sciatica like a few years ago, like as a young and like very severe case of it, and it went really, really far. I didn't have surgery, but I did actually go to the hospital for it eventually. And I get it. Like, if it's that kind of a nerve pain, and I haven't looked at his Reddit, sorry, didn't do that investigation. But if this is like that kind of a nerve pain, that kind of a back pain, that could push you to the limit just by itself. So, again, I'm not saying all the strings got to be pulled, right? Some of the things that may make sense, Mr. Mangione might not even be aware he's part of this operation, Brain fog. Luckily, I haven't struggled really with brain fog. I'm thankful for that. But I know people have, and I think even more so than something like your back. I think your most fragile, vulnerable, and personal part of you is your mind. And if you feel like you're not controlling your mind, I imagine that was excruciatingly painful and frustrating. So, you know, take it for what it is. I'm acknowledging that. Continuing now, his only reference to insurance coverage in the post noted that Blue Cross Blue Shield had covered testing for irritable bowel syndrome. Mr. Mangione stopped communicating with friends and family about 6 months ago. His mother filed a missing person report last month. So, 6 months ago, he seemed to have maybe gone off the rails. This is, again, when we talk about past experiences, this is something we've seen before. And I talked about the use of triggers before in these MK Ultra type maturing candidates, and I actually talked about it back about a year ago in the Covenant school shooting where Aubrey Hale was the shooter. And I talked about how she recently had two of her former middle school girls basketball teammates die recently. And she, for whatever reason, was really deeply bonded to them. And I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but I put it forward that these kind of traumatic events, they function like triggers. And again, this person doesn't know it, that is going to be the end up being the shooter, but it takes them off the rails. And through suggestion, there's so much could be done to steer people into doing these crazy things. So that would be the same pattern. It's a several month-long period of radicalization, whereas before they were laying dormant. And that is a way you can actually get this done if you were someone trying to orchestrate these events on a mass level. Now, Benjamin Brofman, a prominent defense lawyer in New York whose clients have included Sean Combs, Harvey Weinstein, and Dominique Strauss-Kahn, said Wednesday that the people had amassed an overwhelming amount of evidence that left little room for Mr. Mangione to mount a viable defense at a trial. This was a rather brazen act of violence, Mr. Brofman said, given that there doesn't seem to be an inch of Manhattan that isn't covered in video recording devices. It's hard to explain away what happened. So he's actually saying that, well, the cameras ended up catching him later on after he left the city. But also, we heard the story at the time, and I talked about this, is that he went running in the park, and in Central Park there are areas with no cameras. And I talked about how that's going to be used as a talking point to even have more surveillance. Because if they would have had cameras on every corner and in Central Park, then this guy would have been caught. And either way, whichever way you frame this, the conclusion is that, oh, it's good that we have cameras. We need more cameras. Because, again, this is the evidence that's going to convict this guy. But I think the bigger point is if you tried to do this, you'd be stopped. This guy really did have help. Like, one thing or another, you would slip on a banana peel, or you would get the runs and irritable bowels, and you'd have to go to the bathroom. Like, stuff just goes wrong. Like, even if, have you guys ever tried to, like, hang a range hood or do anything like home, like, carpentry project? It always takes so much longer than you would expect. You always run into conflicts. And we're supposed to believe that this 26-year-old guy who's like a computer game programming guy, who just had back surgery a year ago, planned this whole thing, without any complications, pulled it off, and avoided detection. It's, I don't buy it. I'd say insult to the intelligence. Still, he said, that did not mean that the prosecutors' jobs would be easy. They will have a hard time finding jurors who do not feel that they have been treated unfairly by the healthcare industry. I think most people, when questioned about that issue, will say, yeah, I dealt with the healthcare industry that I wasn't happy with, he said. But they didn't go out and execute the head of an insurance company. Police officials in New York City, already concerned that the shooting might inspire other violence, have noted that numerous mock wanted posters with images of high-profile corporate executives had been posted along Manhattan sidewalks. A video posted on social media showed 3 flyers of images with top executives. One of the flyers featured Mr. Thompson's face with an X over it. This I called right away. That Brian Thompson was low-hanging fruit. Like, he's the CEO of a blatantly shady, extensively corrupt, weasel-like insurance company. And everyone knows that insurance claim people, they do everything they can to fuck you. Like, that's what it is. And it always feels like a betrayal. It always feels like you're being violated, because at the end of the day, it's your property that you thought was safe. Turns out it isn't. And you know you're being lied to. You know you're getting fucked, and you can't do anything about it. So that's why this guy Brian Thompson's not going to get any sympathy, and this is why people are going to do just enough celebrating to scare the shit out of the other half of the people that are horrified that you could get killed in the street. And you know, I've been robbed at gunpoint, and I've been refused reimbursement for a FedEx driver hitting my car and knocking my bumper off. And it's the same feeling, those two things. Like, you're getting robbed. Like, that's what it is. So the point is that everybody could relate to this guy. Everybody could relate to hating the CEO of a company like this because of what he symbolizes. It's just theft on a mass scale. You know, people forget the real injustice. It's not FedEx or the guy that robbed me even. It's the government for mandating insurance, and it's the government for not allowing guns and self-defense, and for making it so that the peaceful person has everything to lose and the worthless criminal has nothing to lose. That's whose fault it is. The real injustice, and it's no bias, guys. I've been both of these people. I've been a law-abiding citizen, and I've been a piece of shit criminal. So, you know, I'm impartial. The police department included some of the images in its internal report, which warned that people on social media were celebrating the shooting and encouraging more killings of executives. The report mentioned an elevated threat facing executives in the near term, and said there was a risk that a wide range of extremists may view Mangione as a martyr and an example to follow. Just hours after Mr. Mangione was arrested on Monday at the McDonald's, a young woman was standing outside holding a sign that said, "Corrupt insurance CEOs have got to go." And what did I say last week? They're going to turn these high-level executives into a protected group. That's the goal. And boom. Now it's going to become normalized that policymakers and public officials, that they're going to walk around with security, that you're not going to be able to talk to them, they're going to be behind bulletproof glass, and the people's checks and balances on them are going to decrease. It's a total departure from the Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution idea that the official is one of the people. That it's one of the people who become a public official and then work for the people or among the people. Government for and by the people, right? This is the end of that. We're heading back towards feudalism. And now it's that the gap between us and them is increasing. So that gap increases, people's power decreases, and bottom line is we're going one step closer to the New World caste system. And that's all I wanted to say about that. And on 11:11 p.m. on Friday the 13th, I wish everybody a good night, happy holiday season. Yeah, learn the Trivium. Start recording some episodes. Oh, thank you guys who have been active in the comments. It's awesome to see people commenting and talking, and I hopefully by the time this video's up I will have responded to you. I hope I'm not making you guys cringe too much talking my shit, but I gotta make it fun for me too. Um, we gotta make it fun. Hmm. If we're not enjoying ourselves, we're not gonna get anything done. It's this is another thing that never makes the episode, but it's like the most important thing. So why save it for last? Like, we have to enjoy freedom. We have to enjoy the great work and sharing knowledge with people. We have to enjoy talking to people, because if not, then it's never gonna happen. Unfortunately, the reason why tyranny works is because they make it enjoyable for the people that are working for the system. You're gonna make a lot of money. You know, you're gonna get the girls. You're gonna get the easy lifestyle. It's enjoyable, at least on a surface level. It is, right? A lot of people are surface level type people, the kind that work for them. So it's more enjoyable. That's why they win. It's that simple. This can't be a painstaking work where I'm angry yelling into the mic every week. It doesn't work long term. Um, I don't know how Mark did it for so long. You know? So, thanks so much, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.